Hello and a very warm welcome to the brand new edition of Policy Watch. I'm Kriti Mishra. After deliberations, the government has circulated the Draft Social Security Code, a key labour law proposal that seeks to amalgamate a clutch of existing laws and proposes several new initiatives, including universal social security for unorganised sector workers, insurance and health benefits for gig workers. The code is in line with the government's objective to simplify and rationalise various central labour laws into 4 different codes. That is, Code on Wages, Code on Social Security, Code on Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions, and Code on Industrial Relations. And to get deeper insights on the topic, I'm joined by Mr. Ajay Shankar, former Secretary, DIPP, Nupur Tiwary, Head, Centre for Public Policy Planning, IIPA, and Mr. S.K. Jindal, Chairman, Investment and Capital Markets, ASSOCHAM. Welcome to Rajya Sabha Television, all of you. Mr. Shankar, let me come to you first. The big takeaways and highlights of Draft Social Security Code.
The Draft Social Security Code is a very critical building block of the overall program of replacing the multiplicity over 44 labour laws and state laws relating to labour in the country into 4 simple codes. This has been a reform agenda which has now high priority with the government, and it is expected to create the enabling framework for India to create all the jobs that it needs to create. Because there is a view with considerable merit that we put in a lot of labour legislation in place for the benefit of workers, but it ended up benefiting only workers in the organised sector, and it created barriers to the growth of small enterprises into large enterprises, which would then create more and more jobs. So, the regulatory barrier created by excess of labour regulation and laws was a barrier to startups and to small enterprises in becoming big. So, many small enterprises chose to remain small rather than be subject to the over 40 laws. So, this prevented India from creating all the jobs it could create, and it also prevents India from taking full advantage of its demographic asset. There's a lot of young people, talented, motivated, willing to do hard work, because the employers who are willing to employ a lot of workers have reluctance. So, this is a very critical reform which the Prime Minister has said that this is high on his agenda, and his determination to push it is reflected by the fact that the Code on Wages is already through Parliament, and the intention is to take all of it through. Coming to this particular thing, this is in some ways a little more difficult and a little more important, and which is why the government has come out with a draft, and it will go through the process of I think public consultation to make it as good as it can be. What the present draft code does, and this is the I think the third version of it after consultations, is tries to put together all that is already there on the table. So, there are 8-9 laws relating to social security, and it tries to amalgamate them and put together an architecture for managing what is there. But the challenge is how to extend it to all those who are the informal sector and the unorganized sector, and also to see how there is seamless transition. Because if I am owner, entrepreneur, or a small person employing 10 people, or I am self-employed, how do I make a transition where I employ a few hundred people, and the transition on the social safety benefits of my worker move seamlessly to the new world? So, this is the big challenge. And on the other hand, we have these major initiatives of the government which cover every individual. Ayushman Bharat is the most important one, or the other one on pensions. So, how do we get seamless movement from the other social safety programs which the government has put in position or is rolling out, and what is existing under the Labour Ministry? So, this is a bit of a challenge, and I think it will need a little more discussion and a little more creative inputs from everybody to provide universal social safety for everybody.
So, seamless transition would be a challenge.
Yeah.
But since we are talking about amalgamating laws, Nupur, help us understand what are the existing laws that this code seeks to amalgamate or merge?
See, this is basically amalgamation and simplification for the ease of implementation. And there are around, as was earlier stated, 8 laws, labor laws that have been amalgamated and simplified for the ease of implementation, covering the 4 important area which this particular draft code has laid importance on is universal social security for the unorganized labor, which has earlier been neglected or not taken much into consideration. Second is the gig workers that have been brought into this framework, and there is no real data, I would say, on this gig worker, but basically one consultation firm has given that out of every 4 labor, 1 is gig worker, and that is from India.
Yes.
So this is going to cover a very important component, and apart from that is that corporatization of this EPFO and ESIC that is earlier being headed by the labor ministry, the secretary and the minister by default, but now there will be a CEO, and he will be there will be people working on advisory capacity, economic advisor and accounts and all those things. So this can be a more serious kind of an emphasis will be on having its own officials. And the fourth, being a woman, I would say the maternity benefits that have been given is covering a lot of areas for also unorganized sectors, which was earlier not there. People, especially the women who are migrating or are changing from one field, going from one field to the other, if she is taken of her this crash or child care facilities are taken care of, there can't be anything better than that. So these are some of the very promising, I would say, important areas that have been covered under this draft code.
But help us understand, how would this code help government implement the maternity benefits in a seamless fashion?
See, there are a number of criticism also in this particular, since this is a draft and it's open for comments, and as of now how it will be implemented is not a very clear idea, I would say, at least at this level. But there are issues like as I said, a woman migrating to other places or unorganized women coming from unorganized sectors, how are they going to benefit out of it is a serious question, because if she is moving and she is not having a static, for organized it could be understood that you have number of creches, you have child care facilities, and you're also getting the maternity benefits. But this maternity benefit, there's no mention of cash benefits, like under nutrition, this act, you have at least 6,000 rupees for this labor getting a benefit. These things are not mentioned, and how this is going to be implemented is a big question. But under the organized sector, yes, this is a big challenge, and we have to see how the things are to be taken care of.
Nonetheless, a positive step has been taken, but let's get an industry perspective on this.
Not much clarity on this.
Yes. We'll get clarity as we move on. But Mr. Jindal, tell us, what was the industry's response to draft Social Security Code?
We have been requesting it for quite a long time. That general feeling has been that these 50 to 70-year-old laws, and so many of them which were making life difficult, are not efficient. They are not good for labor, not good for us. They are not balanced. So what was required was to review them and come out with an efficient system, which this draft is talking about. If this efficient system comes into place, then it will take care of all those complaints which we had, and without this, to achieve this $5 trillion economy vision, growth, faster growth is not possible. With such kind of 50 to 70 years old tools, you can do nothing. And this has been a big grudge all over the world that your labor laws are not good. So they were showing their inability to come here. Once they get balanced, they get renewed, they get efficient, then you will see that this will help our growth. It will become win-win for both sides, employer and employee both. It should be like that. All these 4 things which has been focus has been given to safety, very important, health also, welfare also, and improve working conditions. Then what else you want? What else a labor wants? And productivity, this becomes a positive ecosystem for them to work on. So this is what is required, and these laws were preventing that thing to happen. And with these new laws, after this draft is approved and placed into action, this thing will happen. And this improvement is very necessary. If we don't change our ecosystem, those earlier things are not relevant anymore now. We need things according to today's requirement. So this is what it will do for us.
But you mentioned a very important point about striking a balance, and let me take that to Mr. Shankar. Mr. Shankar, how will the government ensure balance and cater to the needs of the industry and the labour class as well?
First of all, I think the point which is important to recognize that the nature of the industrial economy is changing globally. So firms which are there for a lifetime or 2 lifetimes, jobs which are secure for 30, 40 years, is changing the way technology is changing the world. So some change has become necessary across the board because the old social welfare systems were predicated upon the contribution from the worker and the contribution from the employer, and both having a lifelong relationship. So this is the way it evolved in the West. Now that economy is changing and India is leapfrogging into this new economy. So that is one dimension. On striking a balance, what happens is that today the system as it is that the social safety benefits or welfare benefits flow from the contribution of the employer and the employee. That is the model which we inherited from the early days of industrialization of the last century. Now here we want to bring in the entire informal and organized sector, so which is the bulk of the workforce. The organized sector is very small. And separately we have rolled out Ayushman and other social safety nets. So to my mind, the challenge is that how do we combine the two, and as I said earlier, provide for seamless transition, and how much does the state chip in with its own finances?
Yes.
Because if we want to give social safety net to every individual in India, then the order of resources are higher. Now, as a developing country, we may say, okay, we will provide this level today, 5-6 years as GDP grows towards 5 trillion, we will provide more. But to provide for the people in the unorganized sector and the informal sector and the self-employed, it is the taxpayers who has to provide the fund through the budget. So we now need to see how that meshes in with the employer-employee contribution. Now another radical idea which may be worth putting on the table is that if we want to encourage labor-intensive economic activity, then is there some way that we can reduce the burden on the employer and the employee in the labor-intensive industries where the margins are low?
Right.
And see how those who make more profits pay more. So an extreme version of this argument would be that you re-engineer the entire system, do away with labor and employer contribution for firms which make profits below a certain level or where the wages are just around the minimum wage. You bring in the employee and employer contribution where the employee is at the income tax level,
Right.
so which is a very high level. But then how does the government fund everybody, and therefore do we put a cess on the profit taxes on the profits? So some radical ideas also need to be brought on the table and thought through, because if we make it easier for the employer and the employee to grow faster in labor intensive areas, then this whole challenge of job creation etc. would get solved. And the fact of the matter is that in labor intensive manufacturing, India is not yet on the global stage. So all the jobs that are leaving China because of high wages, they are all going to Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia,
Yes.
Indonesia. None of them are coming to India. And every month we are losing opportunity, and the sooner we can start getting those jobs into India, the better it will be for our 5 trillion economy growth and social stability amongst the young who are very restless and do want jobs.
Since we're talking about benefits to the workers in the unorganized sector, Nupur, I'd like to ask you, nearly 85% of our workers are in the unorganized sector. What would this code mean for them?
See, it's, as I said, it's very promising. The most important is unorganized sector, which are getting the social security. they are getting the PF, they are getting the health benefits, they are getting the retirement benefits, they will be getting other maternity benefits. But the important question is, if we think of these unorganized sectors, what is retirement to them? If you take into consideration, for instance, Punya Devi, a lady who is selling vegetables at the cost of she is getting a daily wage of 360 rupees per day. So that is not enough for her to even provide food to her child. So what she is going to give as a, her own contribution for this fund. Secondly, what is her age of retirement? Is it clear? Do we know what is her age of retirement? If at the age of 50 she is earning 360 rupees, when she is falling sick, will she be even sitting at home? So there is no age of retirement for her. So if we take these small instances which really matters under this unorganized sectors, this is very important. Second very important criterion is that what is the contribution? For instance, employer and employee contribution. Of course, government will be providing the subsidies and other things where you have the your wage is even lower than the minimum wage. But which employee is going to provide you that, okay, fine, I am paying this person even lower than the minimum wage? It's not possible to get this kind of certificate. And otherwise, even people who are getting certain amount of wages which is above the poverty line, but it's not that simple to contribute 15 or 20% of their monthly earning to this kind of funds. Thirdly is, what about the market fluctuations? Who is going to contribute when there is a market fluctuations? So number of issues where you don't have much clarity into this. Language, like registration itself, where are you going to get yourself registered? If you're moving, if you are changing your say employee 5 times a day, a painter, a daily wage worker,
Yes.
If he's a painter, he's a rickshaw puller, or if he's a person who's a carpenter, maybe he's changing his employer 5 times a day. He can't be considered in a self-employed labor, that kind of thing. So in that case, how many times he is going to change his registration, and what language he is going to take his registration in? So these are the issues which, as of now, I can't speak
So two
much.
important points you're making. One is about the registration, and the second one, of course, fund. Let me take that to Mr. Jindal. Mr. Jindal, this draft provides for setting up a social security fund by the states. But do you think contribution from the workers, that is going to be a huge challenge?
No, I don't think. If the ecosystem works well, efficiently, and it is good for everybody, employer and employee both, then they will also feel happy. I was in Norway once, and I was told that we are paying heavy taxes, but everything government is taking care of us. We can always get whatever we need, education, health, etc. So they were very happy, which is not a case that somebody is so happy with the government. So similarly here, these conditions will improve. We believe so, but the pace may not be that fast as in the case of Norway, because we are too many.
Yes.
And resources are limited. So if these conditions improve, we are already talking about the improvement for the last so many years already. So these things are going in the right direction. As I look at, balancing of these laws is very, very important, making it easy to the extent that business becomes easy,
Yes.
ease of doing business, and we should be able to achieve our target of below 50 ranking, what we are looking for. All these things are important, and they are taking us to the right direction, and they need to be done. There is no other, it is inevitable. If we continue with this, then we cannot reach anywhere.
But another important point was of registration. Mr. Shankar, how will the government ensure registration of the workers given their diversity and fluidity of job?
There is an advantage today which was not there 5 years back, which is the very rapid extension of the digitalization of the Indian economy and the Indian society. So everybody has an Aadhaar card today. So and now we are talking of getting the same card to work for Aadhaar as well as for other purposes. So once you have this digital backbone in the country, then a worker could, in theory, be registered in Tamil Nadu, come to Delhi tomorrow, and the system should recognize his existence and where he stands in the social safety system. And similarly, if digitalization is really well in position, then the graduation from self-employed to partially employed to worker in the gig economy to worker in a regular firm and then back to the gig economy, that transition can be handled better in the digital system. And the benefits can be calibrated depending on what your income is and where you are in the system. So, there is a huge potential for doing things which were unthinkable 5 years back, which has been created by the rapid expansion of digitalization. But the challenge is to think it through and design it in a way where the organized sector worker, the unorganized sector, the self-employed worker all have social safety benefits. And as I said in my first set of remarks, that I need seamless transition from one to the other to the employed sector and again back, because jobs are no longer permanent. Firms downside all the time, and the reality is that a large number of firms have as many as 30 to 50% workers who are casual labor. So, they must get all the benefits even though their jobs are not permanent. And the jobs are not permanent is reflected by the fact that we are having a huge downturn in the auto sector. But if you look at the formal employment of the auto firms, you will see no layoffs. So, all the layoffs have happened with the contract workers. But if all of them are brought on par in one social safety net which is fair and uniform across the country, and all the basics are taken care of in terms of a minimum income or food, health care, maternity benefits, disability benefits and old age pension, then I think we have laid the foundation for a really modern society and economy.
Along with labour laws. Nupur, I have last 60 seconds on the show. Another important point in the draft was setting up a central social security board and corresponding boards at the state level. What would be the function of this body?
See, they will be registering with this central security board, and the down will be the state security board. The funding will be not provided, but coordinated by these boards, because funding are going to be coming from the employee fund and other sources that are there. So, it will have a very important role if we have a centralized way of doing it, and also at the state level, it will be more having a better structure and having its own employees and all. So, it will have a great role in that.
All right, thank you so much for joining us on this important discussion. So, for the first time, the proposed regulation extends to the entire workforce and covers all informal sector workers. So, that's all we have for you in this edition of Policy Watch. Thanks for watching and stay tuned to Rajya Sabha Television.